I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit vpn.fm to discover more.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breaking down the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. This summer, he was the magical Mr. Mistoffelees in the City Springs Theater Company regional production of Cats. Before that, he was Mr. Mistoffelees on the international tour and Mungojerrie in the West End revival of Cats. So welcome, Harry Francis, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. We're actually live, which is fun. Also makes this way more fun because it's rare that we get to do it these days. Most of this is virtual, but I always got to start at the beginning, the very beginning of your Cats history.
Yes.
When did you first see it? When was your first experience with it? Like, let's get from the very first time you saw it.
So, my first performances of Cats were age 6 for my parents, jumping around the living room, trying to be Jacob Brent. So that was my first introduction. I actually remember, I want to say, did Hey Mr. Producer come out first? Maybe that was my introduction where I saw a bit of it on the Cameron Macintosh celebration. But I remember when the film came out, the 98 film came out. And I remember very clearly going to Apollo, which was a bit like Blockbuster. It was our UK video store, and convinced that the first day it comes out, age 6, that this is where I can go and get it. Of course, they had no idea what I was talking about. So I remember very clearly marching my mum and saying, we have to go because I want to see this film. Anyway, we got hold of the VHS and I was obsessed. I watched it day in, day out. My parents must have gone crazy hearing it on repeat in the background. But I was so drawn to its theatricality. I was so inspired by the dancing. But yeah, I was, like a lot of kids, I was just obsessed with it. And yeah, it was, and I've been so fortunate over the years to have met and have worked with so many people who were in that film. And every time I'm always a bit starstruck. So that was my introduction. And then years and years later, I auditioned. In fact, I nearly did the show a few times. I was offered a track as a swing in the German production in the tent tour, which I didn't end up taking. But there was always a part of me that was just desperate to do the show. And yeah, so when they had the production on at the London Palladium, and that was the first time I saw the show live, and it felt like living that childhood dream again, seeing the whole show come to life. And I was so sad that it was coming off, and I thought, oh, that's such a shame. I wish I could have been a part of this. And then I was auditioning for something else, and our pianist for the audition walked out of the room, and I overheard him talking to someone else, and he said, yeah, I'm playing for the Cats revival, and yeah, they're going to close the show, take it out of town, then bring it back in again. And suddenly I didn't care about the audition I was about to go in for. Yeah. I think it was Seven Brides, Seven Brothers. Suddenly I didn't care about that. I suddenly thought, all I want to do is be in Cats. So I auditioned for it, and I was auditioning for Mistoffelees, Skimbleshanks, and Mungojerrie. Eventually got the job, but playing Mungojerrie and understudying Skimbleshanks, which was so exciting. However, there was always a part of me that was desperate to play Mistoffelees, especially as that was such a big inspiration to me. But I had the best time playing Mungojerrie in Blackpool, and then we went back to the London Palladium, did a great run there. And then I thought my time in the junkyard was done. I would have loved to have gone back, but I moved on to other things and thought, okay, well, that was a lovely part of my career. And then years later, they were taking the tour out to China, and for some reason they couldn't find a Mungojerrie. And I happened to be doing a ballet class next to where they were doing the auditions, and I saw the casting director. And as I walked out the studio, I got a phone call saying, hey, are you available? Could you come and play Mungojerrie? And I thought about it, and I thought, I want to do the show again, but I want to go back as something else. So I said, look, I would love to come back, but please consider me for something else in the future. And luckily, the guy they had lined up to play Mistoffelees got offered another job a few weeks before starting. And without even auditioning me, they just called me up and said, can you jump in and do it? So I got asked to go into the show. So I went over and I did the tour in China. So we went to Wuhan, Nanjing, Shanghai, Beijing, Wuxi, and then we went to the Philippines afterwards and Singapore, and then COVID happened. So so that happened. And then during the pandemic, I made this film, Cats in Quarantine, which had 333 cast members from around the world who had been in the show. And my reason for that was because I was planning to go back to the tour during 2020, and I never got my final performance with that tour because I left the tour thinking I'm going to be back in a few months doing it again. So I never had closure. So I thought I want to do something for myself to celebrate my time on the show. And it was such a great project. It took me 9 weeks to make. So if you haven't seen the film, check it out, Cats in Quarantine. But also for me, it was a big celebration of Gillian Lynne. Although they had named a theatre after her in London, I didn't think in her final years she was celebrated in the way she should have been. With the show being re-choreographed and lots of changes being made. And having been one of the final companies to work with her, like anyone who worked with her, I had so much love and respect for her and I wanted to celebrate her work. So I made that film and then moved to the US. And so I moved here a year ago, and my first professional performing job here was doing Cats again, but this time directed by Bayok Lee. And the majority of the show, I want to say about 80% of the show was the original choreography. It was Gillian Lynne's, and Bayok directed the show and added her own moments to it. And she did a great McCavity fight and a few other sections, which was fun. And Jacob Brent came in to teach Gillian Lynne's work, which was so exciting, getting to work with the guy who inspired me to dance. So it was a great full circle. And as it was only 15 performances, it was really nice to go for the version of Mistoffelees that would have maybe been too hard to do 8 shows a week. I thought, I'm going to give every single trick, jump, extra thing that I ever wanted to do in this number. So we added even more into it. So it was great to go, I can handle this. My body can handle 15 performances. And it was a great production. It was great. That was a very long answer to your first question.
I love it. Because there's a lot of things that I have follow-ups on. So
Okay.
we'll tackle these individually.
Sure.
I also think I guess I'll start with the Cats in Quarantine was pretty early on in me doing this as well. You know, I started this podcast leading up to the 2019 movie. And so I kind of was going to end it. And then it kind of kept going because people started continuing to want to interview with me.
Sure.
And it was, I got sent this. And I remember we chatted in probably 2020. And here we are today in 2023, finally getting this to work. But we talked originally because of that video. And so I was so glad to be able to make this work. And it was one of those things I was like, man, this is still going everywhere. Like everyone, there's so many people in it. And
there's no end to a cat's journey. It's now and forever.
I know.
It goes on forever.
As I keep recording these, I'm like, yep, I've got more people to talk to. Like I've talked to probably 3 people in your video, I think. And so, it's endless. The thing that was so special with that time, you know, it was a lonely time in 2020. And I set out to do this project without much thought. I just made a very similar film for the Chorus Line company, but that was maybe 20 cast members or less. It was a much smaller project. And without thinking about it, I just put it on social media. Anyone who's ever been in the Gillian Lynne production, send me this footage and here's an email address. And then the video started coming in. I thought, oh, hang on, I'm going to have so many people. How am I going to make this work? So I ended up emailing other people and saying, can you send me this section, that section? And I decided I was going to do the entire Jellicle Ball. But the thing that was really special was I made sure I responded to every single person who sent me a video because it was so moving that I'd spend days downloading these videos. And right at the end of the day, one more email would come through and I'd see a video of somebody in a park somewhere with a cat's tail and their wig from, I don't know, from the 80s. And I go, somebody has spent time doing this for themselves, but also for me and for Gillian. And it was so special to have that. But I had this wonderful interaction with so many cast members, including a guy called Stephen Hack, who was one of the original Swings on Broadway. And as soon as he found out what the project was going to be, he rounded up people like Ken Page and a lot of the original cast members in New York. And I had so many wonderful emails backwards and forwards to people who would also send me pictures and videos of all the wigs they've still got and the costumes. So I made lots of pen pals, basically. And there are still people I meet today in the city that I go up to them. I say, hey, we haven't met, but we know each other because we've spoken and you were in the film. So, I've had a few interactions in New York because of that film. That's
nice.
so cool. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that like, for me, even hearing someone who's not been involved in it, didn't do it, hasn't danced it, hasn't sung it, but to hear everyone's stories, it's like you get to hear these people reminisce and think back to a time that was really usually powerful in their life. It's like a very intense show. And so you get a lot of like, you become, it's like a family at the end of it. So it's been really fun to like even just hear that as an outsider of all of those different experiences.
This show is so painful and difficult to do if you don't have a great company around you. And I've been so fortunate that every company I've had, you become a tribe, you support each other. And especially the first time where I had a partner, I had a rumble teaser, my friend Georgie Ashford, that's another person, Georgie Leatherland, a different Georgie. You had your support system. So whenever you would do your makeup and stare at yourself in the mirror and go, how am I going to do 2 shows today? You had people around you and we'd lift each other and we'd go out and we'd kill it and we'd do a great show every day.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the show so special because it's an ensemble piece.
Yeah.
And
it's a tribe. It truly is a tribe.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to the West End revival because you got to perform with Street Tugger.
I did.
Which there's not a lot of people that get to say that. And it's a very polarizing piece of the show. So I know you weren't Mistoffelees back then, but I'm curious to like, as you've been Mistoffelees now in other productions, and there is definitely a Tugger Mistoffelees dynamic.
Sure.
How did that dynamic differ, or did it differ between a Tugger Mistoffelees when it's the Street Tugger versus when it's more of the traditional Tugger? And Street Tugger is the nickname. It's, more contemporary Tugger. But...
I don't really feel like with that version, that relationship was very strong. For me, what didn't work, let me just firstly say I had 3 different Street Tuggers, Antoine, Jack, and Marcel, and they were all extremely talented and brought different things to the show. However, the thing that for me that didn't work, and the reason I think why they went back to the original Tugger, is they had 2 Mungojerries. They made him cheeky and naughty and all those things, but he wasn't this kind of sexy rock star that came on.
Yeah.
Which was a very different energy to Mistoffelees. It's a very different energy, and I think that's why there's this kind of rivalry and then a love, and there's all these different things that people look into with those 2 characters. Especially when it's Quaxo and he's singing He's a Terrible Bore, and then by Act 2, when Quaxo is now Mistoffelees, you've got him singing his praises. So there's all these different elements to it. Watching Mark in London and Jack and everyone working together, I don't remember really seeing there being much of a dynamic really between the 2. So it was kind of out of nowhere that Tugger starts singing about him. I feel like with the original version, there's such a big contrast in qualities of these 2 characters that there's just more to read into, I think.
Yeah, it's more written into it. It feels like it. Yeah. Especially with instead of it just being a line, it's a line, but also like what does that line mean? Is it a friendship? Is it a relationship? Like it's clear that there is some bond in some way. And I've not been able to see a Street Tugger performance besides, a YouTube clip of just the song. I've been able to see a little bit of it, but it's hard to see the whole, like, there's not a 2.5 hour version for me to watch very easily.
I don't think you're missing out on much. Again, the actors we had playing it were all wonderful and they were so talented. It was a work in progress. I think it's a work in progress that should have been workshopped and they could have discovered it doesn't work. When I saw the show live for the first time before I went into it, I remember the disappointment of seeing all these wonderful numbers, seeing Mungojerrie Rumble teaser live and seeing how dynamic that number is. And then Tugger bursts through and you go, I want John Partridge. Yeah. I want that guy with the big collar to come through. And the guy did a great job and he's a talented dancer and he was working so hard. But it's everyone's favorite cat. So the fact that they would play with that one, it was confusing. And when I went back into the show, what was so wonderful, Gillian's world was not hip hop, surprisingly, but she worked so hard to keep adapting the number. She then eventually had us all moving more with him. So originally we were quite static and sang at him, and then he rapped, and then he would do a solo. She kept trying to add us into the choreography more, a bit like the original number, to bring more energy. She kept trying and trying. And that was so wonderful to actually have a part of the experience where we got to see her create as opposed to just replicate the production. And she was trying so hard to make it work with him. And then it just never, for me, paid off. And so when I returned to the show with the proper Tugger, I remember getting to that number and going, oh, this is what it should be.
Yeah.
It just works.
It's easy to look back at it now because it's like we're looking at it from later of like, all right, it didn't work. A lot of people said it didn't work, and we're viewing it. Whereas especially I've talked to Daniel, who did it as that, performed as that Tugger. I do kind of like, in the moment, I'm probably not against it. Like, because change is change. Like, there's going to be people against change no matter what you do. And there's some current Broadway shows that have been on for a while that have tweaked and make changes. And there's some people still super angry at those changes. And there's some things where I'm like, you know what? That's actually probably a good little change.
Well, there are also lots of changes that people, for instance, Mungojerrie Teaser, the original London version, is very different to the one that was in the 98 film. Anyone who saw the version before the 98 film or before the Broadway production, that's the version they go, no, it should have always been that. Now, I like both. I prefer the most recent one. And the show's changed over the years. Karen came in and redesigned the makeup, which is the version we see in the 98 film. The costumes were adapted over time. So the show has morphed and changed, and I'm all for change. I'm all for them cutting Growl Tiger and the Siamese cats. I was definitely up for that change. And the last version I did, where we did the version where Growl Tiger was cut and it went from Gus, the same as the Broadway revival, and it went into the Rumpus Cat, it went into Peaks and the Pollicles. I love that change. It keeps the show short and sweet, and I thought the storytelling was clear. So there are some changes over the years that I go, oh, I'm so pleased they make that change. And so I'm so pleased they tried the Rapping Tugger. I just think it's one of those things, it was such a big change. If you're going to change it, change the whole show.
Yeah.
It was just too jarring in the middle of the show that it was, it was pretty much watching the 98 film still on stage. And then suddenly there's one big element that was different. That was such a big change.
It's so fascinating to kind of like think back to it, because it is, it's at that point it's been running what, 20 years, more than that, maybe even
more. And
so it's a big adjustment on something that people have, but they know. Whereas I think a lot of times when you make some of these tweaks early on, it's like, all right, we weren't set on it, versus now there's an entire movie. There's people that it's recorded, it's been played in every dance class for every child, and
sure has
in there, so it's like it's there, and there's that piece. And I think like, you even get a little bit with the new choreography, like that's changed, but that still sticks to the source material for the most part. So that's just more of a contemporary, new choreographer change. So, but even that has a lot of people that are like, there are some passionate, Gillian Lynne's is the only one I want to see ever. And
all I can say is I remember so clearly having these rehearsals with Gillian, because I think she knew this. I think she was told at the beginning of our run that the show was going to be re-choreographed completely for Broadway. And then I think they later brought her in, so it was a collaboration. But I remember before that was maybe agreed upon with her, she had just seen Hamilton, and I remember she came into rehearsal and she was raving about how brilliant the choreography was. So one thing I will say, anyone who isn't a fan, I can at least say that I'm sure that was a very hurtful experience for Gillian, and that's why a lot of people defend her, but at least she really admired Andy's work. So I'm sure there would have been lots of lovely moments in that collaboration. Sure. I mean, I wasn't in the room, so I don't know, but I do remember her raving about Hamilton and seeing the choreography. I do remember her talking about that. So I always hope that there was a respect.
They're two brilliant people. They're two brilliant choreographers. I do think like the more I've thought about it and heard more about it in general, because as someone, again, who knows nothing about, I've never done a choreography or anything. It has to be hard in Andy's shoes, even, of like, here's one of the most famous dance numbers ever. You want to stay true to somewhat of it, and then put your own spin on it, but also stay true to it, so it's like, it's got to be kind of hard to, versus starting from scratch.
Well, that's the thing. In a way, it would have been easier if they said this is a new production, completely new set, new costumes, new concept. That maybe would have been even easier. And it's a really difficult task, but I think he's also a genius. I think his work I've seen over the years is just amazing. And the way he makes the entire stage move, makes the whole yeah, I think he's wonderful. So yeah, there will always be people who are traditionalists, and in some areas I will be as well. But no, I also I think we've got to always experiment.
Yeah.
Otherwise, art just stays static, and I think we've always got to give it a chance. If it doesn't work, it doesn't eliminate what was there before.
Exactly.
We can have a play, we can see, and if it all fails, we just go back to what it was, like they did with the Tugger.
Yeah.
So,
yep. I've always related this to sports where, these major sports that have happened have minor rule changes. And there's a group of people that are like, oh, how'd you change baseball?
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, you know what? It's more entertaining now. It's like there's some value of those things, and some things are going to change, and like you have to evolve with the time. And so when you're 40 plus years of doing it, you have to figure out those tweaks. So I'm all for it, but it's fun because I get to hear all the dissenters of it. Like having this show, I get to hear all the feedback. And as someone who isn't knowledgeable enough to tell you any of this stuff anyways, it's kind of fun to listen to all the different arguments. And
sure.
I'm like, yeah, great, sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm like, my whole show is about why Grisabelle is not the right Jellicle choice. Like, I couldn't tell you the first thing about the choreography.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the international tour. So you're in overseas. I mean, you're in China, and I've heard a little bit about different audience. Like, you've had extremely different audience demographics, basically, of being in the West End, being overseas, and then being in Atlanta, like outside Atlanta.
Yeah.
What did you notice about reception? Because, I mean, it's still a widely, like, everyone loves this show. Like, if people are coming are floored by it. But I've heard that there are some, like, nuances to audience, like, behaviors and reactions in the different places you've done it.
Well, I would say China was the most interesting because from city to city, because China is so huge, we saw such a huge difference. And we opened at the Culture Center in Shanghai, which is, a very beautiful modern theater that has operas and ballets and touring companies coming in. So they're very used to international companies coming in. And they were a very polite audience. They were very polite, not very loud. At the end, they would go crazy, but throughout the show, you felt like you were in a library. It was like dead silence. Before the show would start, there was just no atmosphere. It was just very... And then our second venue on the tour was Wuhan, and we were in this crumbly, beautiful, but broken down old theater where there was maybe one Western toilet working backstage, and we were going, oh God, what's this place going to be like? And it was the best audience I think we've ever had with the show because it was like a rock concert. Yeah. We came out at the beginning to do, the green eyes, the flashing eyes during the overture. And I remember the place going crazy. I remember during Mistoffelees, all the very basic tricks, like the can that pops out with all the silk, the audience gasping and clapping and cheering. And I felt like, oh, this is like, I don't know, I felt like an audience who weren't familiar with it, who were taking it in through fresh eyes, which was so exciting to perform it that way, where it wasn't people going, oh, I love this moment, or I know this bit coming up. It was people naturally reacting to what they were seeing for the first time. There may be some people there who were Cat fans, but in general, it felt like a very, very real experience, like a fresh, new experience. So yeah, no, it was, for me, that was the biggest difference. West End was lively. It was great. We knew what to expect there.
It's such an interesting example of that, because I've thought not that extreme, but when you hear about tours in the US even, we're sitting here in New York where we're, 10 minutes, not even up, we're 3 subway stops from anything you want to see basically, and a bunch of stuff that's amazing that, is extremely high quality, something that's like really offbeat, but you've got every version of theater here.
Sure.
And then you go to these small towns in rural America, and they get 2 shows a year, 3 shows a year, maybe, and it's whatever's touring, which means that it's been successful enough to have a tour, versus maybe something that's a little bit more edgy and trying here that you can catch in New York. And so I think that I'm curious if that sounds like that's what was happening too when you're traveling out international. It's
sure.
They might not have ever seen this. They probably don't have the VHS. This is the first time they're seeing it at all. And maybe that theater doesn't get much in general. And so this is the outing.
Well, we would find a lot of the fans or people who either were fans from previous Cats tours, because obviously the show had been to China before, but maybe hadn't played certain venues. I'm not sure if it had been to Wuhan before. But a lot of the fans would travel from Shanghai to Beijing to Nanjing. They would travel around and see the show numerous times. So we would have a fan base who would, be repeat viewers, who would come over and over. So we would have that fan base who maybe would bring that energy with them. But yeah, it was so exciting. But the audiences in Atlanta were amazing as well.
We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died.
Tell me about Atlanta.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great, beautiful, huge theatre, the City Springs Theatre Company, the Byers Theatre, and it's beautiful. It's stunning. It was such a perfect first job in the States. Amazing facilities, and the head of marketing asked me for a photo of me as Mistoffelees. So I had a picture I had taken on my phone backstage of my face in the mirror. And he was very, very clever and took this photo from my iPhone and he blew it up and it was on a huge billboard right outside the theatre. And he did a lot of photoshopping to it, so you couldn't tell that it was a photo just from my phone. But it was hilarious walking in every day and seeing this huge picture of my face as Mistoffelees.
You were on a billboard? Like
yeah, it was a screen that we tried to take, but
okay.
I would swap in with other adverts, but it was literally by the theatre. So, of course, I had to very, very loudly, shout, "Oh, this is so embarrassing. That's my face," just so everyone would turn around and look at it. But yeah, no, it was great. And we had a mix of people who, there were a few people who'd done the show before. Caitlin Bond, who I think you've had on the show. She came back and she was the Victoria, and a few other people who did other regional productions. So yeah, but also it was nice to come in with a company who didn't know the show, and we all had to find it in our own way. That wasn't necessarily the same process as doing the traditional version, but there was new ways, and Byork added new things, and we did this very, very entertaining day, well, actually very interesting day, where we sat around in a circle for the afternoon and we all came up with our backstories of our cat and where they had come from. And it actually, in a way, it was very interesting to see where people's minds went. Some people's, the guy playing McCavity, his story was deep. I can't remember it now, but it was fascinating to see where people's minds go when they really get to think about it. And they really take the text and what they have and go, how can I pull this apart? Okay, well, what could this tell me? And it was very interesting to hear people come up with ideas. And so it was interesting. And then we had Jacob come in, who gave a lot of his own backstories that some I had heard, some I hadn't. And there were different versions. So it was interesting to That
was probably the first time, and this now explains this because I didn't realize that's how that went. I recorded with Jacob and we talked for an hour plus. Yeah, and we could have went for 2 more.
Oh yeah,
and I want to have him back at some point. Like I feel like I need need another round of questions.
I want him one day to play Gus.
Yes, that'd be full circle. He's ready. He's not ready yet. He's not there yet.
Not yet. But I said to him, because when I saw he put on Facebook that he was going to be returning to the junkyard and I was about to do the show, and I messaged him, I said, "Is this the one in Atlanta?" And he said, "Yes." And in my head, because Byork was directing it, I thought, wonder if he's going to be in it. Maybe he's going to play Busterford Jones. And so I said, "Are you in it?" And then he said, No, I'm going to be, assisting and teaching Gillian's work, which he did amazingly. He hadn't taught the show for 10 years and it's all there. Like
talking to him, it's like he remembered everything.
And so that was wonderful. But what was I saying?
Well, I was going to say that was the first time I had been tipped off of I've been doing this for 4 years now. Over 4 years now. And I've always kind of there's a good listener base and it's fun and I know people listen to it, but I never really, I've been joking, I want to influence the show. I want to influence the show and get people to make a different Jellicle choice and, kind of the humor of that. But also rethinking through, there's 40 years of telephone. I call it Cat's telephone. Yeah. Which is, there's not one right answer for a lot of these things. And so that was the first time that I had somebody actually message me and was like, people are listening to your show to hear from the other characters who have played the show to try to figure out the backstory. So it's they're using previous episodes to say here's how this bomb ballerina thought about being bomb ballerina. This how this person, Mungojerrie, thought about being Mungojerrie. And that was eye-opening to me.
Yeah, and actually, no, it's true actually, because I actually listened to Jacob's recording with you during the rehearsal process. I remember seeing his name come up and I was like, I better have a listen and see what else he has to say. But also, the thing I do recall him saying is sometimes people read into things, like you'd watch and go, why is Pounceville interacting with Cassandra at this point? And maybe they've got this relationship, and actually maybe they were just whispering each other's ears something silly and they were just joking around. But sometimes we look into everything. But that's what I think is so wonderful about the show, is there is so much room for interpretation, and that's what can keep it very, very fresh. And Chrissy Cartwright, I need to give a big shout out to Chrissy. Chrissy has been teaching the show in the UK, international tours, South Korea. I want to say since its second year in London. I think she joined then. And anyone who's done the show who's British has worked with Chrissy. She's just extraordinary. And the way she teaches the show with so much care, love, but she also allows you to find it for yourself. For instance, say if you're doing, I don't know, you're in the middle of Gus or one of these numbers, she doesn't dictate where you have to sit on the junkyard. She lets you find your place. She gives you some encouragement. She gives you some guidance, but she allows you to find it. But also, she wants the show to always look the best. So for me, with Mistoffelees, I'm a left turner. I do everything to the left. I can do it to the right. So the rest of the show, I had to do everything to my bad side. So I can do it both sides, luckily. But it got to the Mistoffelees number, and I said, can I turn to the left here? Can I do my coupe jetés around the stage? Can I go to the left? And she was like, yeah, let's change it. So she allowed me to change the number. So I think I'm the only person, from what I can see, who has done pretty much the entire number on the opposite side, because she wants the show to always look as best as it can. So I have to give a big shout out to her. But she really, she gives you the information on each character, but she does give you the space to discover it for yourself. So my Mungojerrie was very different to Ben Yates, who was just before me, who was wonderful. And it's different to other Mungojerries I've seen. My Skimbleshanks was very different from Evan, who I understudied. He played at Welsh and he was wonderful. And I played mine a little bit more like Rex Harrison, very, very clipped, and I guess probably sounded like Stewie from Family Guy. So Chrissy really has looked after the show beautifully for so many years, but she allows that space and she allows that interpretation. So there is no right or wrong answer, but sometimes it's interesting for someone to plant those thoughts in your head, because it makes you go, oh, I've never thought of it this way. And I mean, the question I've had a million times is, Mungojerrie and Robert Teaser, are they siblings? Are they flirting? I mean, our version was definitely very flirty and that kind of way, so we tried to not see them as siblings. But I've also seen versions where they are more like, brother and sister having a bit of banter and playfulness. So yes, there's lots of interpretation.
Well, and I think there has to be, and I think that's like, I firmly believe that's why the show is so successful, is because it isn't so, this person has to go and do it this way and this thing at this moment. Like there is enough space that you get to, like, the core doesn't change, but there's enough that you get to have fun, and you can do it 8 times a week without it being a complete drain. And have those tweaks. And then it's also, I think it's what adds to the lure, because you get a lot of conversations that you probably don't get if you don't have, like, our Bomb and Demeter sisters or not, or the friends or not. And there's like a pretty mixed bag on some of these thoughts of what they are. And it's coming from one book, a poem. There's not that much written word on it. Like there's not an answer for that, unless someone who originally created it in the 80s decided to, I'm going to add, here's exactly what I did. I firmly believe they didn't think through most of those things. Like no one thought that. There's a lot of questions I've asked that I'm convinced nobody thought about when they first did the show. And that's okay. And that's what makes it fun.
Completely. And it keeps it interesting for so many fans who watch the show over and over, because there will always be new dynamics.
Yep.
And, actually, in a way, I said about the street tugger being more like a Mungojerrie because he was cheeky. When Antoine was still with the show in rehearsals, who had been in the production just before the Palladium, I remember doing all the improv sections and having so much fun with him on stage, because that's why there was a different interaction, because you suddenly had two people who were very cheeky, who wanted to mess around. We wanted to tie people's tails to the set, and we had two people who were very naughty, as opposed to Tugger having a different energy. But, I think for fans to, or audience members to see the show and just look in for new dynamics, and I think that's what keeps it interesting and why the show will always be different. I went to see the show, the last time I watched the show was in South Korea, My girlfriend is she was the Rumple teaser on that tour that also went to Taiwan. And it was just before I did the show in Atlanta. And it was so wonderful with some space to go back and rewatch it. And again, people brought their own energy, their different flavor to each character. And it was so interesting to see that. And I remember at one point someone said to her, "Oh, you should play it more like this."
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, no, why should you have to play it like this? Just because you liked the way somebody else did it? The way she did it was wonderful, and she was fantastic. So there's always room for interpretation. There's always room for interpretation, which is so nice as a performer to have that. Yeah.
Yeah. So your version of Mungojerrie and Rumple Teaser are definitely flirty because it's your girlfriend and you played.
Well, she wasn't.
I know you didn't do it together, but
yeah, I always thought it as that. Yeah, and yeah, because also there's loads of bits in choreography where he's checking her out. So I never saw it as a sibling thing. The only thing that makes you think that is maybe because they look similar, the same makeup. But yeah, my thing is people always, I don't know, there's this saying that people say you end up being attracted to someone who has something about them that might be looking like yourself. There might be I've heard people say that before and you go, okay, maybe that's why they're drawn together, is they look similar. But I'd like to think that they are not siblings. There's a bit more flirting involved and cheekiness.
The most recent people I've talked to who have done that have all said that. So it's not been brother-sister as an answer more. There are plenty others where it's a 50-50 split.
Sure.
And I've heard all across the board. But that leads me to the question I do want to ask is, what are some of the other relationships over maybe where you saw some differences between your three productions of where this was a really strong duo that they maybe didn't play as much in this one, or some of those different nuances having done it in three versions?
Ooh. I'm just trying to think because, I can talk about, from my point of view with Tugger, obviously, I mean, as Mistoffelees from the international tour and in Atlanta, there was definitely more in the recent one. We had Spencer Dean playing Tugger in Atlanta. And in his number, there was a lot more sassiness between the two of us. There was a lot more. It was very, very, it was more than just an eye roll. It was very much like I was fed up of having around. That was a much bigger thing. But we also became, the Mistoffelees number became more of a double act in many ways because we interacted a bit more in the combination and there were a few more moments where he would be involved. So it was very much like we were raising each other up as opposed to suddenly Tugger, which I always find it out of place. He's so narcissistic and then suddenly he completely hands it over to Mistoffelees. And for me, a nice moving moment, if it works, is when old Deuteronomy appears and you think he could easily take credit.
Yeah.
And he goes, a cat so clever as, and he points over to Magical Mr. Mistoffelees. And I used to always play that as, is he going to give it to me? And if not, it's fine because he's humble and he won't take, but he gives that moment, and it's a lovely turning point for Tugger to kind of say, no, this wasn't all me. I brought him here, but he's the person who saved you, and he's the one who saved us all. So yeah, it was fun to, I'm trying to think what differences are though, because then again, I guess me and George had a similar dynamic, but George very much, he sang the number brilliantly, but then he would kind of give me the space to do my Mistoffelees thing, as it was less of a double act. He was like, he would then take a step back and Mistoffelees would dance and then he would step in. But yeah, me and Spencer, we had a few more moments throughout. So it was kind of like, he was egging me on. He was cheering me on throughout, but we had a few more interactions. I'm trying to think though. I'm just trying to think what differences there were. I know later on I'll probably think of a bunch of things, but.
Well, let's go to some rapid fire then.
Yeah.
You've been in multiple productions, played a couple cats. If you could go on one day, any cat, any character, male, female, one night, who would you want to perform as?
One day, Gus. One day, Gus. I'd love to go back and play Skimble. That's something I'd love to do, is to go back, because I only went on once. I only did one performance of Skimble.
One time.
And I was literally rabbit caught in the headlights. I had so much fun. I got the call. The guy that I understudied would never call out. He would just he never did. And then eventually they signed him off. He had an ankle injury. And so I was not ever expecting to go on. I'd done my homework. But so when I got this phone call saying, And I just arrived at the theatre. I was about to start my Mungojerrie makeup, and they said, "Right, you're on tonight." I went, okay. So luckily, he was so sweet, and he FaceTimed me or whatever we had at the time, and he spoke. He said, "Do you want me to talk through you?" And he thinks, "Oh, well, that's really kind." So yeah, he was on FaceTime while I did my makeup, and he spoke through any changes that had happened in the show that I may have not been told about, because they had lots of rehearsals where they wouldn't invite the understudies or wouldn't want the understudies there. So therefore we would go, we don't know what's, like, the whole Growl Tiger number changed. And there was a whole pirate number. They had changed it. And I kept saying, "Please, can you give me a rehearsal?" Because I'm backstage quick changing into the Siamese costumes and I never get to see it. So I had no clue what they did because I was always backstage changing. And so he luckily spoke through the entire number with me. So somehow it went well. I got through it and I had a great time. So I'd love to go back and do that properly and do a run. And also it's a much easier role physically on the body than Mistoffelees.
Yeah.
And I think it would be, and it's still a fun number. So I'd love to do that, but I'd love to do Gus because it's the number I may have skipped by on the VHS when I was a kid.
Yes.
But what I love now is the simplicity. And it's one of the few moments where everyone sits still and you listen to T.S. Eliot. You listen to some very, very funny lines and very, very funny lyrics. And I just think it's beautiful. I come from an acting family and, I'm forever hearing my dad talking about various friends of his who are of a certain age, and they may become quite forgetful, and then suddenly you get them onto the right topic, and then it's as if they're 30 years old again. And it's so moving when I think about those people, because I'd like to think, I'd love to draw some of that and add that into it. I also did the show with Barry Hayward, who he started the show at the New London Theatre as one of the singers. This is when they had booth singers before they even had the swings doing it. Then eventually, towards the end of the run, they brought him over to be a old Duke Gus standby. So he ended the London Palladium run as the standby. Then he did every single UK tour, international tour. He then did the first Palladium run and then came back to the Palladium with us again. And he was part of the furniture. It was like everyone knows Barry because he's done every single production, always understudying old Duke and Gus. And then the final time he did it was with me in China and the Philippines and Singapore. And I shared a dressing room with him in Singapore, which was amazing. It was me, Joe Henry, the Mungojerrie, and Barry. And his Gus, although he brought lots of his own thoughts and ideas to it, whenever he would do something, I go, "I love the way you do that. That's really funny." Or the way you hold that and it always gets a big laugh. He'd always go, "Oh, I can't take full responsibility. Tony Timberlake did that." Or, this person did that. And he would list of all the people over the years he's understudied, and he would always give them credit to the moments. But his version of Gus over the years was drawing in from all the wonderful other actors he had seen, and plus his own flair on top. And it was so beautifully moving. It was the right balance. It was no impersonation. It was his own, but he had drawn all the others. And I feel like over the years, I've seen my fair share of Gus's. So I feel like there's a few things I'm like, oh, I know these bits work. So I'd love to have a go at that.
You'll be ready. One day.
Yeah.
One day. Yeah, I think the 98 movie part's really interesting too, because it's a little, as a kid especially, probably easier to skip over. I think it's also a little different because the Gus was very old, famous. He was blind at the time. Like it is much more of like a Gus
John Mills,
John Mills, but Gus in like Gus's element. Like it was like a much more true, this guy's on his last leg. He died shortly after, I think. So it is a very different than like, you get a young theater performer who, not young, but like someone who's still with it enough to be able to dance and do that. Whereas he pretty much walked up there, sang and song, and then they sat him back down.
And he was, when I look back at it, it's such a beautiful performance.
Yeah.
It's so real. It's so real. And that's what's so wonderful about it. It's him in a cat costume, but it's John Mills being of an actor of that caliber, that age. And it's so beautifully done. But yeah, I think at the age that I first watched it, I just wanted to see the Jellicle Ball, and I wanted to see Tugger come back on,
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
But I do, I think it's and I've seen some wonderful performers do it over the years. And the audience always gets, the energy changes. I think they start and they think, oh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And by the time he comes back on to sing again, or he they think he's done, and he has one more thing to say. The audience always laugh. They're always, no matter what language I see the show in, they're always won around by Gus. He's got so much heart, and so many people identify with Gus, whether that's them personally or they have a grandparent or they know somebody. And it's a really moving moment. So I think one day, hopefully not too soon. I don't think I look quite old enough just yet. Maybe a lot.
You got some time. You got some time. But I'm convinced the show will still be going by the time you're ready to do it.
I hope so. I hope so. It will. I don't know what form it will be in at that point, but I hope so. I think it'll be a lovely full circle one day.
So, who are your favorite and least favorite Cats characters? Take out performers.
I'm going to say Mistoffelees is a favorite.
Okay.
I'm going to say that as a favorite, but that's mainly because
it's a common answer. It's not. Yeah.
There's just something otherworldly and magical all the way through. Love Rumpelteazer. Do you love Rumpelteazer?
There might be some influence.
I
on
love
that.
Jenny Anydots. Yes, there is some influence on that. Yes, Jenny Anydots is always adorable and so much fun. And it's got to be Tugger. Everyone loves Tugger.
Yeah,
real Tugger. The
and what about dislike?
Dislike Genghis, because it just was very inappropriate. The leader of the Siamese cats.
Okay.
So definitely that, because that always felt uncomfortable doing.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that version is no longer being done. Do you know what? I don't have a least favorite cat. I think that they all bring something to the show, and that's the thing is, we have done cut shows where you have to cut one of the twins, or you have to cut something. Every single person in every production I've done. Even if the show goes ahead and it's a wonderful show, the show will be different if that person isn't on stage.
Yeah.
And every character brings an element, whether that's Alonzo, who's a bit more, snooty and a bit more stuck up, or you've got Cassandra, who's elegant and mysterious. Whoever it is, they bring something to the show. That character is very much part of the tribe. So there's no one I dislike.
So the way I look at this question, because I agree with you, I think that they all have a place.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at it as like, you got your family. Which is the one that who's the family member who kind of who kind of bugs you a little bit? Like just personality, one has to kind of that you need them, you love them still, but which one is like, all right, I've had enough of this cat for tonight.
The one I think you can kind of get rid of is Mustafa.
Yeah, okay.
Because he interrupts the party for a moment, then he disappears. He doesn't bring anything else to it. He's not there at the end, obviously because that actor becomes someone else. But he just comes in for his moment and then disappears and goes off to another tribe to eat food there. And, but he comes in and he shows off and then he leaves. So for me, he's sort of a lovely character that everyone loves having around because he's a bit of fun, but he's one I think you could also, if you had to cut a number, you could cut that quite easily.
He was cut from the cruise. So I think
I heard that. Yeah. Not originally. I think
they did the full thing, but then they had to, they realized that you can't have an intermission in a show no one pays for.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, so it does make sense. Favorite song?
This is going to be a weird one. I actually love Old Deuteronomy.
Okay.
But mainly the instrumental version in the ball. I love the vocal areas of it. I love the way the cast sing, and I love that moment. But there's something that I always find, it takes me back to my childhood, is hearing, and it's the ballet section that the Hunsball Kabakati do with Mistoffelees. And every night I'd love dancing to that because it felt like I was jumping back into my 6-year-old mind hearing that. But it's just something beautiful about the way that's played. And then, the movie version where they played it with that huge orchestra, hearing that music being played like that. For me, it's that. As a full number, there's lots of wonderful numbers. I do love Mungojerrie Rumpelteazer. I think it's a great number. But for me, that piece of music is the bit that always moves me. I think it's a really beautiful melody. So I do love the Old Deuteronomy melody. Yeah.
All right. Most important question. I've argued at length. I don't think Grisabel's the choice. So do you want to defend her or are you going to vote for somebody else?
Okay. There's a few things. I think Mistoffelees gets a real bum deal. He has been brought over. He is dressed up in all the sequins. He has just raised a cat from the dead, or he saved that cat from death. He has done some pretty amazing things, And just as he's just finished this big number and danced for 12 to 15 minutes, Grizz comes over and just decides just to, like, she's sneaking there at the last minute and she just decides to, steal his thunder. So I used to always be bitter. I mean, luckily I was very naughty. I used to crawl off the stage during memory and die in the wings. So I used to always play into the fact that I would be, obviously, when they would all greet her as she's going to the Heaviside lair, I would have some understanding for Grizz and I would be supportive of it. But I think in my mind as Mistoffelees, I'd be going, you're kidding me. I waited to the last second so I can jump in there and steal the show tonight and be the jellicle choice. And then she would just jump in right after me. How dare she? So yes, that would be my
So you're voting for Mistoffelees. I love it.
From a selfish point of view, yes, because for any Mistoffelees around the world, that's such a hard number. But also as a character, you think, come on, you just saved Old Deuteronomy. However, putting that aside, putting the selfish side section aside, or side of myself aside, I would go for Gus because he's not. I don't think he would expect it. I think he's such a sweet soul who has lived his life, and he celebrates his life, and he'd be very happy to say that was a wonderful life I had and disappear. But I think because of that, I think he deserves a second opportunity. I just don't think he would be desperate for it. He wouldn't do anything to make it happen.
Yeah.
If anything, he's kind of encouraged by Jelly. She brings him out and she sits him down and she starts to tell everyone, it's like, no, you need to hear about him.
Yeah.
And I think even years before, even if he was, a younger version of himself, I don't think he would, unless people really egged him on and said, come on, they would take him to the pub, as they say in the song, and he would sit around and he would start telling his stories. I think he would be the person who would go, oh, yeah, I've done a few plays, but, he would be humble. He would, and I think it takes someone to go, no, come on, you have something to add to us, you have something to offer. And so I would go for Gus. I think Gus, and I think when we did the show in Atlanta, hearing Jacob talking about it more often, I was more persuaded. I thought, actually, yes, Gus would be a great choice.
So I keep tallies. Am I putting down Mistoffelees or Gus for you?
Put Gus down for me.
Okay. I can put 1A, 1B, but I'm keeping a running total, and I'm keeping track, and I'm happy that Gus is catching up.
Yeah. Do many people stick to Grizz?
Oh yeah. I mean, she has half the votes. She has about half of.
I mean, it's difficult because I look after Gus. Obviously Grizz would be the other choice. But that's my opinion. However, for the show to work, it has to be Grizz. So I'm going with Gus, but I understand the format of the show. It has to be Grizz because it gives you hope for redemption.
Yeah.
Any mistakes you've made in your life, and I'm sure people have gone into detail about all the backstories on Grizz.
Totally.
You've heard everything.
I get the Grizz story. There's no doubt that it was written. It's not someone didn't just decide randomly to pick one. Like there's an arc for this. It doesn't make me happy.
Do you know the story about the opening night in London?
No.
So there was a bomb scare at the theatre. Do you know about this?
No, I don't think I have.
So it was just during the IRA bombings, and there was a bomb scare. They got a call saying, we believe there's a bomb at the New London. I think that I may be getting the story slightly incorrect, but I'm pretty sure this is all right. And this was happening during Act 2, and they were thinking, right, we need to evacuate the building, but we're so close to the end, the critics, the audience, they need to hear memory. As soon as we get to the end of the show, we tell everyone to leave the theatre straight away. And they just said, if we don't get to this moment, we've got no show. We're not going to have a hit. They have to get to memory because it's the big turning point. And anyway, they get to memory. The place erupts, goes crazy. Elaine Page, wonderful, wonderful. And as everyone runs off stage at the end of addressing of Cats, they call Brian Blessed aside, who was playing Old Deuteronomy. They said, right, as soon as the curtain call's done, you have to stop everyone and say, please evacuate the building. We need to stop straight away. Anyway, the cast come out and they do their bows one at a time. Bill Bailey, Cassandra, whoever. And Brian Blessed eventually runs out and the audience are cheering and he puts his hands up to say, stop clapping. And they shout and cheer and clap even more. And he puts his hands up again and eventually he stops them. And by this point he gets silence. He doesn't know what to say. And he just says, there's a bomb in the building. Everyone get out.
Oh.
Brian Bless is dressed up as a cat, and he shouted, "There's a bomb in the building, everyone get out." And then, of course, there's panic and everyone starts running and screaming and running out the building. So that was the way the opening night went, but they had to get past memory. Jeff Shankly, apparently, who was the original Mungojerrie, left the theatre in his cat costume and thought, well, I'm not going to go to the opening night party now. So he decided to get in the car, apparently, in his cat costume. He went home and then he came back the next day and returned his costume. So apparently that's how the first night went, but it was so important for them to get to memory otherwise. And the thing that's interesting with this show is people talk about the I Want song in a musical. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, that's Cinderella sitting on on a piece of wood somewhere singing My Own Little Corner, or Eliza singing Wouldn't It Be Lovely? It would be the hope song. It's the song of what would I like by the end of this show, or what does this character strive for? Cats is full of I am songs. And that's the biggest difference with this show compared to lots of others. There's not necessarily an I Want song, but Grizz has the storyline that has a finish to it. And she has the, beginning, middle, and end. She's come in, you see that no one wants her there, you see that she sticks it out. And by the end of it, you see how the audience, the cast and the characters react to her. So she has that through line. So without that, you haven't got a show.
Yeah.
So from a creative point of view, I would say Grisabella, but I would still vote for Gus because I think he's a beautiful character.
I love it. We're going to keep Gus as a vote, but I have softened on my stance a little bit over time of this, of like, I can get it. I can get behind it. But,
sure.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. How can people stay in touch with you on social media?
Yeah, give me a follow on Instagram. I'm Harry R. Francis, and you'll see lots of Cats videos on there.
Yeah.
When we were in Atlanta, I did one where there were 5 of us who had appeared in a chorus line with Byork, and so we came in early one day and we did the entire opening combination, but in our Cats costume on the junkyard. And I think all the Cats fans were very confused, but kind of loved it. So that video is up there. But yeah, give me a follow, and you may see lots of other Cats pictures and videos over the years. So
amazing. Well, thanks so much for being here, sharing stories. Great, amazing stories to hear from you. And I hope everyone enjoyed this. This has been fun. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died, or check our website, thewrongcatdied.com.